and they are ready to fight for 6 rounds against some of the best competition Florida has to offer, all for a chance to say, we are the January Cool Stuff Games Maitland Premier Challenge champion. And we're getting ready for our first matchup here, ladies and gentlemen. Our first matchup on stream today is Edwin Baez versus Matthew Laughlin. I do not have their team sheet, by the way. And we see their teams on screen right now, guys. Edwin Baez is running the Tornadus Incarnate, the Fluttermane, Ogerpon Wellspring, Farigiraf, Rillaboom, and Urshifu Rapid Strike. As we do see on his open team sheet, guys, he is running the Covert Cloak Steel-type Tornadus with the Terra-type, Bleakwind Storm, Tailwind, Rain Dance, Taunt, a very supportive Tornadus, which does bode well for his Ogerpon Wellspring and his Urshifu Rapid Strike, with the Prankster Rain Dance being able to turn Surging Strikes or Aqua Jet into massive power moves alongside that Terra Water. And his Rillaboom with the Assault Vest is one of the best Pokemon defensively in the meta right now. As we look at Matthew Laughlin's team, he's got a Booster Energy Fluttermane, also a Scarf Urshifu, but this with Terra Steel instead of Terra Water. Farigiraf with the Terra Fairy and Citrus Berry, the Amoonguss with Rocky Helmet Terra Water, a very good defensive Pokemon in and of itself. Incineroar, another great defensive Pokemon with pivoting abilities, rocking the Assault Vest with U-Turn, Snarl, Flare Blitz, and Fake Out. And Matthew's new favorite Pokemon, the Ursaluna Blood Moon. This combination of Farigiraf and Ursaluna Blood Moon, ladies and gentlemen, has been making the rounds recently with a really strong combination. Ursaluna Blood Moon from the special attacking side does everything that the physical regular Ursaluna does not, with those spread hyper voices, Blood Moon being a massively powerful move, and Earth Power to hit those pesky fire types, especially if you Terrastalize into a fire type or even Terrastalize into a steel type. That can bode well with the Earth Power plus the Life Orb, ladies and gentlemen. And honestly, looking at both their teams, they both have very strong cores throughout. It is definitely going to be something to see how these two trainers match up with each of their strategies, with both of them carrying the same Urshifu, having a Choice Scarf as their item. It remains to be seen which Pokemon might win the speed tie here, but we are going to get into game number 1. We see Edwin lead with the Urshifu and his Farigiraf, and Matthew Laughlin also leads the Farigiraf alongside his Incineroar. So looking at it right now, we have 2 Giraffes on the field right now alongside the Incineroar, but Incineroar is basically in a bind right now as it does not have the ability to go for Fake Out due to Armor Tail being on Edwin Baez's side, therefore nullifying the Trick Room. As we do see Matthew make a switch out on Incineroar into the Amoonguss here. Amoonguss comes out onto the field, and the Urshifu goes for these Surging Strikes into the Amoonguss slot, taking Rocky Helmet damage with these critical hits. Each turn is doing about a little bit of damage to each of the Urshifu's health per hit on the Surging Strikes, which it is also locked into now by the Choice Scarf. And Matthew's Farigiraf goes for the Psychic, does enough to knock out the Urshifu here. So Matthew Laughlin gets the first KO of this tournament as Edwin Baez goes for the Trick Room and twists the dimensions here. So now this Farigiraf has set up Trick Room, which kind of plays into Matthew Laughlin's team, so to speak, because now the Farigiraf is one of the slowest Pokemon on the field, but Amoonguss is known to be a very slow Pokemon in and of itself and can therefore get off with some Spores potentially, or even some Rage Powders, which, while the Ogerpon right now does not have to worry about due to it being part Grass type, a Terra here potentially would lead to the Ogerpon's moves being removed. As we do see Edwin go for the Follow Me on his Ogerpon, trying to bait this Spore out, and it is the Spore, which does not affect. As Farigiraf goes for Psychic on Matthew's side into the Ogerpon, does a good amount of damage while Farigiraf goes for the Hyper Voice here and activates its Throat Spray. The Throat Spray item giving it a +1 boost to its special attack after using any sound-based move one time. And we do see choices being made by Edwin Baez and Matthew Laughlin here, as we do see Matthew make a switch on the Amoonguss here to get the Regenerator ability out, and in comes Incineroar back out onto the field. And we see the attack drops come out due to the Intimidate ability, as Ogerpon goes for the Follow Me once again. And Farigiraf goes for the Psychic here into the Ogerpon, brings it down into the red, and the Psychic on the Farigiraf is not affected at all by that Incineroar with the part Dark typing. That was a great switch on Matthew Laughlin's side of the field, getting that Regenerator while also dealing with the immunity of the Psychic move into the Dark type Incineroar. And now our trainers are thinking very long and hard, as we do see a helping hand come out on the side of Farigiraf here, as Edwin goes for Spiky Shield. So a helping hand plus a Spiky Shield here, a good double defensive maneuver, as a Dazzling Gleam comes out on the side of Matthew's Farigiraf to do some damage into the Farigiraf. A good amount of damage as a Snarl comes out on Matthew's Incineroar, and this Snarl hits the Farigiraf, and now that Throat Spray boost is nullified on the side of Edwin Baez's Farigiraf. So now it remains to be seen, what is Edwin going to do in the face of this Incineroar, as it does have the Snarl capabilities to lower Farigiraf's special attack output. As we see a switch out here on Edwin Baez's side, Ogerpon Wellspring comes back to Edwin, and out comes Gucci Mane, the Flutter Mane. And the booster energy is activated with the Protosynthesis, giving it a speed boost. Now, Protosynthesis and Quark Drive are activated with either Sun, Electric Terrain, or by using the booster energy. And by going with the speed, this Flutter Mane is now a +1 in speed by virtue of that booster energy, as long as it is on the field. If it switches out, it loses that speed. However, the Trick Room just ended, ladies and gentlemen, so now Flutter Mane is the fastest Pokemon on the field. So now Flutter Mane can do good damage to either Farigiraf or Incineroar here, as the Terra is potentially being selected by Edwin Baez on this Flutter Mane to do massive damage with the Moonblast or the Dazzling Gleam, or even the Shadow Ball, even though it would be resisted and not very effective on either Pokemon on Matthew Laughlin's side here. And we do see the Terastal Orb being activated by Edwin Baez into this Flutter Mane. And Flutter Mane is engulfed in crystals, and out comes the pink heart of Terra Fairy on the Flutter Mane. And Flutter Mane goes for the Terra Fairy Dazzling Gleam. This is a massive powered attack, but it does not much damage thanks to that Snarl damage, nullifying the damage on Farigiraf. As Incineroar goes for the Flare Blitz into the Flutter Mane and knocks out the Flutter Mane. And Flutter Mane is now down on Edwin Baez's side. Matthew Laughlin has all of his Pokemon still remaining, as we see a Hyper Voice come out on the Farigiraf, and the opposing Farigiraf on Matthew Laughlin's side goes for the Trick Room. Once again, Trick Room is up on the field. And out comes Ogerpon Wellspring back onto the field to potentially try to get some damage out on Matthew Laughlin's Pokemon. However, Ogerpon is the fastest Pokemon on the field right now by virtue of the Trick Room, so therefore it would go last in the move bracket by virtue of its speed tier, unless it goes for the priority Spiky Shield or Follow Me. As we see Spiky Shield come out from Edwin Baez, trying to stall out a turn of Trick Room here. Farigiraf goes for the Psychic into the Ogerpon slot, and it is a protected move. And Incineroar goes for the Flare Blitz into Farigiraf, and Farigiraf lives on 2 HP. What a survival! And the Trick Room comes back. Oh my god! The Trick Room has been reversed, and now this Ogerpon is the fastest Pokemon on the field. So now it remains to be seen, what is Matthew Laughlin going to do here? Is he going to try to go for another Trick Room to reset it, or is he going to go for the damage? Because Ogerpon is now in the red. Farigiraf is at 2 HP. Any damage will knock out the Farigiraf, and maybe, just maybe, it'll knock out the Ogerpon as well. So now Matthew Laughlin is having to decide, what does he want to do in this turn? This is an amazing play. As we see Ivy Cudgel come out into the Farigiraf slot, and Farigiraf goes down. So Farigiraf is finally down as a U-turn comes out and knocks out the Ogerpon. And Incineroar, by going for the U-turn, it now can bring in a partner for free while also switching out by virtue of that U-turn. And in comes the Amoonguss back out onto the field, ladies and gentlemen. Amoonguss back out, and Farigiraf goes for the Psychic into that Amoonguss slot. It does good damage and brings it back to the yellow on its HP, but Incineroar comes back out onto the field and activates that Intimidate once again. As Edwin goes for the Hyper Voice, but Incineroar is faster and knocks out the Farigiraf with the Flare Blitz. And Matthew Laughlin takes his first game of this best of 3 in round 1, 3-0 over Edwin Baez. That was an amazing game to start off this Premier Challenge, ladies and gentlemen. What a set by both trainers. So looking back at that set of that game, ladies and gentlemen, Matthew Laughlin and Edwin Baez both played that set very, very well. Matthew Laughlin being able to pilot through the Trick Room that was set up by Edwin Baez originally on that first turn, playing into Edwin's strategy of trying to set up Trick Room, potentially trying to scout out a Trick Room on Matthew Laughlin's side by going for it first, and then Matthew's Farigiraf being able to nullify the Trick Room, but being able to survive on 2 HP to get rid of the Trick Room late in that game, giving Edwin a slight window of opportunity to potentially force the battle back into Edwin's side. That bodes well for Edwin in this matchup here. As for Matthew Laughlin, that Incineroar did massive damage and massive support throughout this battle, and Fluttermane on Edwin's, Ogerpon on Edwin's side, and being able to take that Spore away from the Amoonguss, because Follow Me does not negate Grass-type moves as Rage Powder would. That was a very good play on Edwin Baez's part, being able to keep his Farigiraf awake throughout the turn of this battle. It remains to be seen what is going to happen in game number 2. We do see a switch up on Matthew Laughlin's side. He leads Ursaluna and Amoonguss on this turn in game number 2. Meanwhile, Edwin Baez comes in with the same lead, being that Urshifu, Rapid Strike, and the Farigiraf. Now, we have to remember that Urshifu will be able to affect the Ursaluna through its Protect by virtue of its ability Unseen Fist. However, with Amoonguss on the field, this Pokemon can Rage Powder, and we saw what happened in game number 1. Urshifu took 3 hits from the Rocky Helmet by hitting it with the Surging Strike. So we do see Ursaluna go for the Terra here, and out comes the Terra Normal Ursaluna Blood Moon. And this Pokemon is very powerful, ladies and gentlemen, as Amoonguss goes for the Rage Powder right here to redirect any moves, as Urshifu goes for the U-turn into the Amoonguss, takes the Rocky Helmet damage. However, it does damage while switching out here, But we have to remember that Ursaluna does have the Mind's Eye ability, so any Ghost-type Pokemon that comes in will be taking damage from these Normal-type moves. As we do see Rillaboom come in for the Urshifu Rapid Strike, activating that Grassy Surge. And Farigiraf goes for the Psychic, does big damage into Amoonguss as Ursaluna goes for the Blood Moon into the Farigiraf. A Terra Normal Life Orb boosted. It does enough for the one-hit knockout. What a powerful move by the Ursaluna Blood Moon just now. And with the Life Orb, it gets its recovery. It gets a little bit of recovery back, virtue of the grassy terrain set up by this Rillaboom. That was an amazing play by Matthew Laughlin just now. That was an amazing play. Absolutely amazing by Matthew Laughlin. Going for that Blood Moon, getting rid of Farigiraf. So now, if he has Incineroar in the back, he can potentially go for Fake Outs, much like Edwin Baez has right now, as long as there is no Farigiraf on the side of Matthew Laughlin. But we see Ursaluna switch out, and in comes the Farigiraf. So now with Farigiraf on the field and a double switch out, Farigiraf comes in for the Ursaluna, and Incineroar comes in for the Amoonguss. Amoonguss gets its Regenerator while Incineroar's Intimidate comes out and lowers the physical attack of Rillaboom and Urshifu. And with the Armored Tail, Rillaboom cannot use Fake Out. We see a close combat come in the side of Urshifu into the Farigiraf. It does a good amount of damage just now throughout the neutrality, as normal types are weak to close combat. However, they are resisted by Psychic type Pokemon. So that was a good choice by Edwin Baez there to get the close combat damage into the Farigiraf here. As you do see Edwin potentially considering the Terra on the Rillaboom here to potentially survive any Flare Blitzes coming in from this Incineroar. And we see Ogerpon come in for the Urshifu Rapid Strike here as the Terra Orb is activated once again on the side of Edwin Baez. Rillaboom engulfed in crystals, and out comes a Fiery Chandelier, symbolizing that Rillaboom is now a Fire type instead of a Grass type. And Incineroar goes for the Fake Out into Rillaboom, gets a critical hit on top of that, and Farigiraf goes for the Trick Room and twists those dimensions. So now Farigiraf is the slowest Pokemon on the field by virtue of that Trick Room going up. So now it remains to be seen what is going to happen on the side of Edwin Baez. How will he be able to pilot through this Trick Room that Farigiraf has just set up? As we do also know that Incineroar cannot Terrasilize, Farigiraf cannot Terrasilize, and Amoonguss cannot Terrasilize on Matthew Laughlin's side. However, Farigiraf goes for the Psychic into the Rillaboom slot here and gets a special defense drop. And Incineroar goes for the U-turn and does damage through the resist on Rillaboom, but it does get that all-important switch out here. And now it remains to be seen what is coming in. It is the Amoonguss into the Incineroar slot here, as Rillaboom goes for the Wood Hammer. Grassy terrain boosted Wood Hammer does good damage into the Farigiraf thanks to the grassy terrain, but the Citrus Berry is activated on Farigiraf, gaining 25% of its health back as Ogerpon goes for the Ivy Cudgel into the Farigiraf, and it survives. Farigiraf with a huge survival there, an absolutely huge survival. That is the power of Intimidate, ladies and gentlemen, being able to lower your opponent's physical attack, as that Wood Hammer from neutral plus the Ivy Cudgel most likely would have been able to knock out this Farigiraf, which is absolutely insane to see the Farigiraf live. As Ogerpon goes for the Follow Me, potentially trying to bait a Spore or a Pollen Puff on the Amoonguss, as Amoonguss does go for the Pollen Puff. Super effective damage into the Ogerpon, and Farigiraf goes for the Psychic here. and brings Ogerpon down to the red. Rillaboom goes for high horsepower in a Farigiraf, and Farigiraf is down for the count. However, by virtue of Farigiraf going down on Matthew Laughlin's side without Armor Tail, Rillaboom can theoretically switch out here, reactivate the grassy terrain, and then have 3 grassy glides for the remaining 5 turns of the grassy terrain. However, there are only 2 turns left of Trick Room, and Amoonguss is the slowest Pokemon on the field. So now Edwin has to think long and hard about what he wants to do here as Ursaluna comes back out onto the field, and this is a Life Orb Terra Normal Ursaluna Blood Moon. It will hurt with any move it clicks potentially into Edwin's team. You see Rillaboom make a switch out here. Into the Urshifu Rapid Strike here. Ogerpon goes for the Spiky Shield to protect itself from any damage click as Amoonguss goes for Spore into the Ogerpon slot, potentially predicting a switch on Ogerpon, but Ursaluna goes for the Hyper Voice, and this is going to hurt. Will it do enough to knock out this Urshifu? The Terra Normal Life Orb Hyper Voice is enough, and Urshifu is down. And out comes Rillaboom once again, ladies and gentlemen. Rillaboom is once again out. However, the grassy terrain has been reactivated for 5 turns, and with no Farigiraf on Matthew Laughlin's side, a fake out is very possible on the side of Edwin Baez into this Ursaluna slot potentially that would negate any attack while also allowing Ogerpon to do damage into the Ursaluna as well. However, there is the thought of the Incineroar in the back for Matthew Laughlin that could potentially come out here and take any hit while also negating the physical attack of Edwin Baez's 2 remaining Pokemon, which are notoriously physical attackers by their nature. As you do see a fake out come out onto the Ursaluna slot here, and Amoonguss goes for the Spore into the Rillaboom. By virtue of Rillaboom becoming a fire type, it is now no longer immune to those spores. And we see a grassy terrain boosted Horn Leech, a critical hit, but that is big for Edwin Baez. By getting that Horn Leech off, it gets recovery not just from the Horn Leech, but also from the grassy terrain. And by virtue of that last turn, the Twisted Dimensions return to normal. Ogerpon is now the fastest Pokemon on the field. However, Rillaboom is now going to have to take a turn of sleep by virtue of that Spore. As you see Ursaluna switch out here on Matthew Laughlin's side into the Incineroar once again, potentially trying to bait a potential Horn Leech into that slot, but also more importantly, lowering the physical attack. As you see, Ivy Cudgel was clicked into the Incineroar slot here. It does big damage into Incineroar, but Rillaboom stays asleep. And a Pollen Puff comes out onto the Amoonguss, into the Ogerpon Wellspring, does good damage into Ogerpon, but that grassy terrain recovery is paying dividends here. As you see Rillaboom potentially clicking its choice of move. You see a Spiky Shield come out from the Ogerpon here, potentially trying to bait a fake out into that Incineroar slot, but it goes into the Rillaboom. I probably should have muted my phone. It was good. It was good. This is an incredible battle right now as Ogerpon is still alive. However, the Rillaboom was asleep for 1 extra turn here, and by virtue of the Amoonguss, it went for the Pollen Puff into the Ogerpon slot here, but did not do much damage by virtue of the Spiky Shield. And now A Hornleech comes into the Incineroar slot, potentially trying to predict a switch into Ursaluna here. And Rillaboom wakes up, goes for the high horsepower into the Amoonguss slot. Not a lot of damage, but more importantly, that Rocky Helmet damage. And Rillaboom does not do much damage into the Ogerpon. Meanwhile, Incineroar gets that U-turn off, knocks out the Ogerpon, and now the Ursaluna comes back onto the field. And Ursaluna once again makes its presence known. Polypuff comes into the Rillaboom, which is a resisted hit by virtue of the fire type and the ability to survive with the Assault Vest, giving it an extra boost to its special defense. So now it remains to be seen what is going to happen on the side of Edwin Baez here. This Ursaluna has come back in onto the field. This Amoonguss is ready to potentially go for any Rage Powders, which will do major damage at redirecting while also giving Rocky Helmet as Ursaluna goes for the Protect. And Rillaboom goes for the Wood Hammer into the Ursaluna slot. A protected move means that Ursaluna will not take any damage. And Amoonguss goes for the Spore and puts Rillaboom back to sleep. An amazing play by Matthew Laughlin just now, being able to put the Rillaboom back to sleep with his Ursaluna out on the field. The grass has disappeared from the battlefield. There is no more grassy terrain. And Edwin Baez hits the concede button, and Matthew Laughlin is going to win this set 2-0. Round one of the Cool Stuff Maitland Premier Challenge goes to Matthew Laughlin. Ladies and gentlemen, that was an amazing set by both these incredible trainers. Matthew Laughlin was playing out of his mind here with that Amoonguss, just showcasing why it is one of the premier redirecting Pokemon out in the VGC realm, being able to redirect any attacks and get those attacks into its slot, especially through the resists, which then in turn leads to the Rocky Helmet damage that Matthew Laughlin had on his Amoonguss, but it also allowed his Farigiraf to set up Trick Room and be able to go for those Terra Normal Hyper Voices and the Blood Moons as well. That was insane levels of damage performed by Matthew Laughlin in this game, and the Amoonguss was essentially one of the MVPs, if not the Ursaluna. Being able to do that much damage just showcases why Ursaluna Blood Moon is one of the premier Pokemon in Regulation F. And having that Incineroar also being able to pivot with U-turn, get that Ursaluna in on good plays, while also having Farigiraf out to potentially negate any fake outs or grassy glides with the grassy terrain up, was incredible for Matthew Laughlin to be able to set up and be able to focus on earning this hard-fought victory in round number one. As for Edwin Baez, his team, very good, very strong on all sides. The Amoonguss was definitely the wild card for him. Having his own Farigiraf was definitely a plus in being able to prevent any priority moves such as Fake Out from the Incineroar, but it just wasn't able to capitalize on the mistakes that were being made. Being able to go into these Surging Strikes with the Rocky Helmet, that is something that is unfortunate, but that is something that we have learned, is that Amoonguss is a very good Pokemon. Urshifu is an absolutely great Pokemon. Both of these trainers played incredible in round number one, showcasing why they are as good as they are today, ladies and gentlemen. And honestly, the Ogerpon being able to redirect some Spores, that definitely helped Edwin out in these matches, ladies and gentlemen. Being able to redirect a move that guarantees sleep in Trick Room while Amoonguss is the slowest Pokemon on the field, that is a big advantage to have in Trick Room. Being able to redirect that Pokemon, because normally Amoonguss we know is a very defensive setup Pokemon, a support Pokemon. Being able to put your opponents to sleep and then Pollen Puff your partner's recovery back. but being able to redirect those spores is huge, and it helped out for Edwin. Unfortunately, it just was not enough against Matthew Laughlin's team. But ladies and gentlemen, we are going to take a quick break and be back with round number 2 of the Cool Stuff Games Maitland Orlando Premier Challenge here in Maitland, Florida.